Welcome to our September 3rd Friday training. My name's Robin Thompson. I am the Executive Director of STAC, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. And we are happy and honored every month to be hosting this program with, again, a wonderful array of experts. And we're also really happy that you all have joined us today. So this is a program that's co-hosted by the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. We're the local coalition in our area. We meet quarterly and we have our emphasis is networking and staying interconnected. We're probably going to have our first in-person meeting since the pandemic this November 3 at 2 p.m. So those of you who are in the Big Bend of Florida and are members of BBCAT or would like to join us, you can note that. We're also highlighting our next Survivor Support Committee, which is October 20th. If you would like to join that committee or have interest, please let us know. We're going to have a representative from the Blue Campaign at Homeland Security talk a little bit about the new things that are going on there. Of course, like every coalition and task force, probably, we're always seeking new members, and we would love to have you join. One of the main, if not the main focus of our work is how can we all do our work to be more survivor-centered, as you might guess, and how vitally important that is. And also know that with January being National Human Trafficking and Slavery Prevention Month, we're in the process now of pulling together thoughts and ideas for what we're going to do in January. STAC is our local anti-human trafficking program here in we're in Tallahassee, Florida, in our state's capital, but we assist survivors in a 6-county area that surrounds Leon County, where we are in Tallahassee. Providing case management services is one of our speakers today, Graciela Marquina. And we also do this, and the only way we do this is with this help and support of many partners in our area and also around the country. We're focusing now more than ever on outreach to our rural areas, and some of our partners, I'm thinking of you, Charlie, on our webinar today, are part of that effort all the time, as well as doing our community education and specific training for agencies, depending on what they do. For example, we've done a training with our 211 Big Bend to talk about how to answer calls from someone who might be calling in either as a survivor or somebody knows someone who's being trafficked. So we do that kind of work too. This is our website, surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. This is where you can find lots and lots of good information. First of all, to tell you, because I always get these questions, we do have and we will have this presentation available after today on our website. I'll put the direct link later in the chat, but you can go to surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. You could please sign up for our newsletter so you stay on top of any of programs that are coming up like this that we'll be doing. Know that you're gonna, we have materials we can send you. We have posters for your workplace. We have all kinds of good things, and we're going to be talking today about our latest resource. So I'm really encouraging you to visit our website. It's rich with information, and you can find out more there. And also know, of course, all of our services are free of charge, as is this webinar, but we will always welcome any donation and support you'd like to send to us, and you can see how to do that and donate on the website as well. One of our latest initiatives was to develop something for our workplaces, and this is called stacpro.org. Our county commission and our city commission has funded us to do this work. And what this stacpro.org training is, it's on demand. It's about an hour long, little over an hour. It is free. You can do it at your leisure over several settings. And what it is geared toward an array of workplaces, and it's geared to you as a workplace. And most recently, we're also doing a special program for nonprofits. But nonprofits are workplaces too, just like any other kind of for-profit business in many ways. So this is something we encourage you, please, to visit that after this program, share it with others in your workplace. And I know that you'll really learn a lot. and benefit from it. We just did one of these programs this week, and it was wonderful to be in a room with other people, first of all, but second, to have representatives from the banking community, from the nonprofit world, who were doing housing, who were doing services for women who are pregnant, who were, there were just all kinds of intersections of how and why this issue of human trafficking really does impact us all, and how the workplace and the business community in particular is important. So please visit us there. Next slide, please. And today we are going to be talking about how to talk about human trafficking for caregivers and for youth. And our panel of presenters today is quite wonderful, and I'd like to introduce you to them right now. And I'm also going to do this introduction in the sort of in the way people will be speaking on our PowerPoint. And just start out by letting you know that the people who are on this call are so smart and so on top of this issue and what they do. And we are so lucky to have them with us today. So let me start off right away with introducing you to Kaya Smith. Kaya is an account coordinator for Salter Mitchell PR, a communications consulting firm in Tallahassee. Her main role is producing content and supporting campaigns that target multi-generational and multilingual audiences. She is Stack Pro certified, yay, Kaya, and played an integral role in the success of Stack's Imagine Freedom fundraiser last year. And let me tell you all that Salter Mitchell won a huge statewide prize. We are so proud that they donated pro bono services for that project, and increased our goal of fundraising just exponentially with the help that they gave to us in our community. We'll talk more about that. She's a recent graduate. Kaya is a recent graduate of Florida A&M University and a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. So yay, Kaya, good to have you with us today. I'd like to introduce next Charlie Jackson. Charlie is a dedicated human services professional with more than 18 years experience serving at-risk youth and families from marginalized communities. She currently serves as the regional advocate for Whole Child Leon, a provider of the Open Doors Outreach Network. As a member of the Open Doors Outreach team, she links young sex trafficking victims to critical resources, including mental health and counseling and housing. Charlie specializes in providing trauma-informed care, implementing evidence-based programs, and collaborating with community partners and stakeholders. She also strives to amplify the voices of marginalized communities by producing and directing short documentaries on racial and gender inequality and social justice. So Charlie, my friend, my colleague, we've done so many trainings together. It's great to have you with us today. Jamie Rosland is a consultant in the field of anti-trafficking work with expertise in the program development and implementation for victims and survivors of sexual exploitation, trauma competent and survivor-centered digital marketing and outreach strategies, and most recently working on policy guides and research projects. She's active in a whole array of activities, local government, statewide policy, and she shares her lived experience and unique perspective, committed to changing the cultural view of the sex trade and addressing systems that drive demand and she confronts gender inequality in her work. She has experience being a mentor, court advocate, and coordinating care to youth impacted by sexual exploitation with Open Doors and with the Dolores Barr Weaver Policy Center. In 2018, Jamie won the Survivor Advocate of the Year award presented by the Florida Attorney General for her work with exploited youth. She's helped the United Nations with documents. And Jamie, I don't know if I ever told, I think I did, but I did hear you on The Argument, which is a podcast that addressed on that particular program of the New York Times. That podcast addressed the intersection of anti-trafficking work and pro-sex work technologies. Graciela Marquina is Stack's community services advocate. She has her master's in social work from Florida State University and has been assisting victims of human trafficking since 2011. She is a skilled researcher and interviewer, and her expertise in working in nonprofit agencies is extensive. She provides training and education on trafficking to communities around the state and the globe, including both non-governmental organizations and governmental agencies. So you all can see we have an incredibly talented, skilled, and wonderful group of presenters today. Well, everyone, so you've heard me introduce the panel, and you saw the title, Talking with Youth About Human Trafficking. And really, this is a program that is based on a product that you are seeing right now. This is called our Resource Guide for Caregivers. This is a part of a whole toolkit of materials that is launching today. This is our soft launch today. We have several other pieces that I'm going to share with you, and we're going to talk about as we go on with this presentation now. But we really wanted to ground you on this topic, first of all, and really explore not just the creation of this document, which is important because we want to talk a little bit about the process, but also to let you know why we did this and the importance of what this is about. So first of all, you can guess, and I don't know if you have experienced this, but how many times we're all out in the world and people say, we need to talk to youth. What are the schools doing? How can I as a parent or a grandparent talk about this issue? Or you might hear things that sometimes require more explanation when someone says, oh, that movie Taken, I need to show that to my teenager so that this doesn't happen to them, and I'm so afraid they're going to get kidnapped. And we know that that's wrong on a lot of levels. We know that the grooming process is really how traffickers get victims and really begin the trafficking process. So we know then this is a huge need. We know that there's lots of misinformation and myths about human trafficking that are kind of compounded and sometimes shared with this. So what we really want to do is start out right away and talk to you about how you talk to youth about human trafficking. And we want to give you some insights into the guide you're about to see. So starting off right away, Kaya, I'd like to just ask you to just help us understand the process that you went through. Now, I should tell you all, the Children's Services of Leon County, and some of you have Children's Services councils. Ours is new here in Leon. STAC was fortunate to be one of the entities that got funded in the first round of funding from the CSC here locally. And what we put out there was we wanted to do something that would help caregivers and youth, particularly those in underserved communities, to know what to do to be safe and smart and be protected against trafficking. We went to our friends and contracted with Salter Mitchell PR to help us do the messaging, do the communication about this issue. And Kaya, you're on the team at Salter Mitchell. I'd like to open the kind of floor to you right now to talk a little bit about what you do at Salter Mitchell, maybe talk a little bit about our partnership, why you're working on this project, and kind of help us understand a little bit about even the graphics that are here, how you organize and present information, and just what you do. So turn it over to you, Kaya.
Hello, everyone. Like Robin introduced me, my name is Kaya. I have been working at Salter Mitchell PR, a communications consultancy agency in Tallahassee, Florida, for the past 2 years. During my time with SMPR, I have worked with STAC. We've worked on several projects together since 2020. Our first project with STAC, we were contracted to make a few posters and a toolkit to raise awareness of human trafficking. And after learning about STAC and this issue and discovering that there is a need for this topic to be discussed all throughout Florida and the Big Bend area, we made STAC our 2021 pro bono client. So that's where we came in and we worked with STAC's Imagine Freedom fundraising campaign. We received statewide recognition for this campaign. We won a total of 3 awards so far, hopefully more to come soon. And we are just so happy and proud to be working with STAC. Recently, we became STAC Pro certified. Everyone in our company took the STAC Pro certification. Robin came to our office, and we really enjoyed learning and raising awareness in Leon County. I want to include and say that it is very important for companies, agencies, and nonprofits to understand the importance of communications and to build strong relationships with each other. That is one of the biggest things I want to talk about. We love working with STAC. We've been working with them for 2 years, and we hope to keep that going. So as we go into this toolkit that we created, I kind of give a backstory on how we first decided to tackle building this toolkit. Robin, Garciela, and Jamie worked very well together and with us on completing a survey with youth and caregivers to find out what exactly they like to see, their attention, what catches children's attention. Do they like cartoons, do they like colors, do they like graphics, or do they like hearing from their peers or from adults? We want to highlight in the survey that you spend a lot of time online, which you'll see throughout our toolkit. We do mention online safety and that human trafficking can happen to you, to your children, to you, anybody on the street, and just even online. And we'll get more into depth about that. But I really want to touch on our toolkit design and copy that our team at SNPR made. We based the design elements off of the feedback we received in the survey. A lot of youth mentioned throughout the survey that they like seeing cartoon designs, graffiti, Snapchat style. So as you see on the first page of our toolkit, you see that we have little animated characters, spray paint designs, squiggly lines in the bright purple color to catch the attention of the students. And we also want to make sure that we don't have images that scare caregivers or youth. We want them to be informed and not feel scared to talk about this topic. It's very important for them to feel comfortable and open learning things like this. And we also want to make sure that in the copy, as you'll see throughout this the presentation, that it's available for everyone to understand. We want to make sure that anybody could pick this up and be able to read it and really see that this is a topic that should be discussed. And I would also like to note that our animated characters, as you'll see throughout the toolkit, are very diverse. We have different hair colors, different skin tones. We have different colored backpacks, different colored clothes. We want everybody to know this is a item for people of every color, every race, every gender, whatever they qualify as, you can pick this up and read it as well. So that is kind of our take on why we designed the toolkit this way.
Exactly. And one of the things I think to share, Kaya, is as we've chosen doing graphic images as opposed to photographs, just to share with everyone too, that too often in the anti-trafficking movement, we've seen photographs of people who are chained or roped or behind bars, or we see very sad people, or we see people that look very afraid and frail, when in fact, those are doing a great disservice, because I can tell you right now, everyone that STAC is assisting and has assisted, hasn't come to us in that way, right? There's just that process of grooming that happens, and it really does a disservice to highlight imagery that just isn't accurate, and those kinds of images don't. These kinds of images, which I really like, are extremely inclusive and are bright. So I know we were really happy as an organization that you went this way. And again, just to emphasize what you said, these are all informed by caregivers and youth themselves, as well as by your expertise as a PR firm, right?
Correct. And I would also like to note, in our toolkit, we also created a custom QR code for STAC. So nowadays, a lot of youth, I know myself, I'm only 23, but I'm on my phone majority of the time throughout the day. If I'm walking down the street and I see something and it's a QR code, I'm going to scan it, whether I know what it is, whether I want to see it. But usually when I see something that I can use my phone for, I do it. So a lot of youth nowadays know about QR codes. So we create a custom STAC QR code for this toolkit as well.
Yeah, and that's great. And it's great to have somebody who's 23 on the team. Yay. Speaking of someone who's got 40 years on you. So thank you. All right. Well, anybody else? And one of the things I didn't say this at the top, but if everybody on the panel wants to unmute for a sec, does anybody else want to say anything about this particular part of the toolkit? How we got started, what you think, any impressions?
Well, when we start talking with, about doing the questionnaire and all that, we design a questionnaire that will give us an idea about what it would be, the best thing to attract kids. And designing the questionnaire was very interesting. Also, the application of the questionnaire, I did some interviews with kids and adults. And most of the interviews that I did were in a on house shelter. And I was very impressed about how the kids were, have this information about how to take care of themselves and about others and friends, and it is a lot of things that we can do in terms of outreaching and education, but talking with kids really made my day. Anyways, I think that the colors and the variety of different hairstyles and everything, it went perfect. I think I really hope it's going to, not only for this time, but it's going to really last for a really long time, this design and the work itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Graciela. And you did so many interviews of youth, and we'll talk about it later, and caregivers, which informed the substance as well as your work going forward at the Hope Community, which is a local organization here that is another part of the Children's Services Council grant. Knowing that you were there 4 hours a week, incorporated interviews, incorporated this information, you're doing the interviews was actually also informing, I think, a lot of the people there and helping them understand who we are, but also helping understand how STAC and other partners are there as a community resource. So thanks for that. Okay, I'd like to move through. What we're literally doing on this webinar today is moving you through the toolkit. And I neglected to ask my fellow presenter panelists today also, it's hard for me to see the chat and do the PowerPoint. So if there's anything in the chat that comes up, would y'all just holler and put, and I know we're going to put information in there as well as we go forward, but please do that. And that would be terrific. So like all good guides, we have a glossary, and the terms that we chose to kind of pull out to emphasize are these. There certainly could be a lot more. And I know those of us who've done any anti-human trafficking training, we could have been talking about the legal definitions. We could have been talking about the AMP model. We could have, done all that. But instead, we decided to really just pull out the key pieces and keep this, and Kaya, correct me along, but we want to keep this like at a lower grade level. We want it to be very accessible in terms of the language, right? Do you want to say anything about the languaging
Yes.
on this?
So the languaging throughout the toolkit and throughout this caregiver guide, you'll see that it is mainly at a third grade reading level. We realize nowadays that people have come from different backgrounds, different settings, and we want to make sure that everyone was able to read this and understand what we're trying to raise awareness about.
Exactly. So anyway, Charlie, do you want to talk a little bit about these terms and maybe, tell us how they're relevant and that you've seen these, what happens in terms of especially children and youth and trafficking, and why knowing what these things are is important.
Definitely. And I do want to say this is really geared towards parents. And so we don't expect parents to be the subject experts on this topic. However, just knowing that basic information, it can help to empower you to basically educate your children and to help to keep them safe. So these are terms that we commonly use, and some of you may even be familiar with them. I know grooming is a term that we have been hearing a lot of in the media, but grooming is definitely a term that is often associated with traffickers. And I know Graciela is going to speak on this term a little bit further. But for those of you who are unfamiliar in regards to what human trafficking is. It's basically exploiting someone for the purpose of engaging them in a commercial sex act or labor through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. But it is important to note, I know we don't have it here, but when it comes to minors or anyone under the age of 18, force, fraud, or coercion does not need to be present in order for it to be considered human trafficking. That young person is being trafficked, whether they identify as a trafficking victim or not. A child cannot consent to being a child sex worker or a child prostitute. So it's important to note that if anyone under the age of 18, if someone is using their body basically as a sexual commodity or as a commodity to extract labor from them, that child is a victim of trafficking. There's a term here, love bombing. I work directly with victims of trafficking, and I can state that many of our clients who have been trafficked by their boyfriends, this is something that has occurred. Specifically, I have one client that was experiencing homelessness, and she met who she described as Prince Charming, and this individual wanted to, make her feel as if I'm here to swoop in and save the day, addressing her basic needs, ensuring that she had something to eat and that her nails were being done. But within 3 to 4 weeks, this gentleman was basically telling her, now you owe me. And now it's time for you to pay up for all of the kind things that I've now done for you. So love bombing is unfortunately something that many victims of trafficking experience. There's also photo metadata, and I'll let Jamie Roslin explain that a little bit further.
Yeah, later in the guide, we talk about phone metadata. It's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, but with our smartphones, not only are they capturing images and videos, they're also capturing the GPS coordinates where that photo or video was taken, as bunch of as well as like time, like and date. And so when we're sharing photos online, all of that information remains in those photos, or if we're like texting. And so phone metadata is simply all that information that's embedded within your picture, when you have it on your phone or then when you share it out into the world. And we'll talk a little bit more on why this is important later on in the guide. But it's just important to know for now that when you take a picture on a smartphone, it's recording more than just the images that you see.
And
Thank
that's
you,
so
Jamie.
and that's so good and important too, right? For youth to know who think they might be, not in the, nobody knows where they are, or they might be saying, oh, I'm perfectly fine in sharing this. Nobody knows where I am right now. And yet the trafficker is going to be able to pinpoint their exact location.
So one of my roles as the regional advocate for Open Doors is I also go out to the community to increase awareness about human sex trafficking. And one thing that I commonly find in when speaking to members of our community, Robin mentioned earlier, is that many have this they hold Hollywood's portrayal of trafficking in their minds. And so often I hear that, when I say, what does human sex trafficking or human trafficking look like to you? I often hear, well, it's when, men kidnap girls and young women and they're being held in undisclosed locations and they're being forced against their will to have sex with men. And I want to reemphasize what Robin said, that is Hollywood's portrayal of trafficking. I'm not going to dispute that does not occur, but we actually know where most victims of human trafficking are. They're not being held in undisclosed locations. And that's because they're right here. They live right here in our own communities. One thing that I often stress when I'm speaking about this subject is that the victims of human trafficking, they are the children that attend school with your sons and daughters. They are the young people that many of us just walk past in the malls, at the grocery stores, in the theater. This crime and its victims are everywhere. And it is right here in Leon County. And it is so important to understand that. There's also this myth that that traffickers are snatching up kids or kidnapping kids. But the reality is most victims of trafficking are very familiar with their trafficker. For many of the young people that I work with, they were victims of familial trafficking. They were trafficked by a family member, their mother, their father. They were trafficked by an adult sibling or a caregiver. It's important to understand that traffickers come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. There are young people who have been trafficked by employers or a staff person at a homeless shelter or at a youth center. It's important to recognize that traffickers, they specialize on building a bond and building a relationship with their victims. So many young people are not being trafficked by strangers. They're being trafficked by someone that they know. It's also important to understand that girls and young women are not the only victims of trafficking. Traffickers do not discriminate. Men, young boys, teenage boys, individuals who identify as LGBTQ, they are also victims of trafficking. And I want to stress that individuals who identify as LGBTQ actually have higher prevalences of being trafficked. And that's because many of them experience homelessness at higher rates versus their counterparts. So it's important to understand that. Another thing that I want to emphasize is the age. And speaking with a lot of my friends, family members, and those in the community who are parents, many tell me that they want to wait until their child is a little bit older to have those tough conversations, such as when they enter high school or when they start dating at 15 or 16. I need you all to know that according to the Statewide Council on Human Trafficking, the first age or the average age of victimization in our state, it averages between 11 and 12 to 14 years old. And what that tells us is that traffickers, they're not waiting. They're not waiting to target your children when they get older. They are targeting children as young as middle school. So it is important to understand that these conversations, yes, they may be tough, yes, they may be difficult, but it's so important to recognize that you can have them when they are younger, because as I stated earlier, the traffickers are not waiting. And so there are signs, there are things that you can look for in regards to identifying whether or not someone is a victim of human trafficking. And I will state that the indicators that we have, they're not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the ones that I think most of us have come to see. And some of the behaviors you want to pay attention to is if a young person has started to lose interest in activities or things that they used to do, they start to withdraw, and not just withdraw from these activities, but they also start to withdraw from the friends that they used to associate with, or maybe even start to pull away from family. This is a very strong indicator. Another thing is you start noticing issues at school. So you have that young person where they're starting to experience a lot of declining grades. The attendance starts to become an issue to the point where now they're dropping out. I would say that a large number of the clients that I work with, one of their referral issues is school absence, is that they have not been attending school on a regular basis. Also, young people who are running away. Those who are running away from home, that is also a warning sign. Something else that I see often is that young person who is associating with individuals who are significantly older than them. Some of the young people that I've worked with who've been trafficked, they were trafficked by individuals who were anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 years older than them. So seeing that shift in their peer groups is also, it's a red flag. There are other indicators about money, but the last one that I want to touch on is that oftentimes many youth will start engaging in using illegal substances or alcohol after they've been trafficked. I recently I accompanied one of our clients to a federal human trafficking trial. And in that trial, they were discussing trying to get her assistance with substance use. And I will never forget what she stated. She said, I did not engage in trafficking because I was abusing substances. I started using marijuana because I was being trafficked. So it is important to understand that when that person starts to use those substances, that could be in response to that victimization. Another thing you'll find is that many traffickers will provide that victim with those illegal substances, and that also falls into that grooming process. And I'll allow Graciela to speak on that a little bit further.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Jamie, Graciela, Kaya, do you have anything you'd like to add to Charlie's presentation, or any thoughts on what she said?
Like Charlie mentioned about the signs of human trafficking, we knew we weren't able to fit all of the signs on the indicator sheet. There are many more, and it's not limited to the amount we included on the toolkit, but it's very important, like Charlie noted, that there's more than this, and that it's very important to be on the lookout for things like this.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that we say pay attention to, we're not saying, oh, when you see this, it's absolutely going to be human trafficking, because you could see all this and it won't be trafficking. You could see half of these or even more, and there could be something else going on in the home. But again, just using the phraseology of pay attention to, I think it helps people, just get the radar focused on behavior that might be concerning, and then to have conversation, gather more information, for the caregivers themselves. And we've mentioned parents a few times, but I think we also have to note that it might be a grandparent who's raising a child, or this guide itself is also helpful to other people, like the favorite auntie or a school counselor, or a coach who, and we found this out in the survey, right? Some of the last people you said they would talk to about this is their parents. So we want other adults in the youth's life who might not be a legal caregiver, but still be smart about this issue, right? And know what to say. All right. Any other thoughts, comments?
I do want to also emphasize, I watched an excellent webinar, and the young man was a victim of trafficking, and he pointed out it was a neighbor. It was a neighbor who recognized many of these red flags, and they were able to call and get the appropriate agencies involved. And that young person was rescued from trafficking, and now they serve as a mentor and an advocate to help others in the anti-trafficking movement. So you don't have to be a parent. Excellent point, Robin. And you may not be an educator or a school counselor, but just someone who takes the time to understand and educate themselves on this issue. You might be able to help someone.
Exactly. And also to know too, just to remind everybody, we're talking about labor and sex trafficking here. And often people who are trafficked are both labor and sex trafficked. That can happen to youth as well as adults, or they might be only labor trafficked. So know that this is, and kind of the terms and a lot of the indicators could be labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking. Okay, moving on to another important part of the guide is to talk about grooming. This is something that is, I guess we can say it's often used kind of loosely. People don't know what it is, but Graciela, in this context of what grooming is, can you talk about what is here, maybe what you learned in some of the interviews, or how you've seen it in some of the people that you've supported?
Absolutely. There is a big misconception about trafficking, that people will be snatched and then trafficked. In reality, I'm going to try to explain why it makes sense so much more to kind of, using the word grooming. If you snatch somebody from the street and it doesn't have any relationship with that person, that person is going to try to escape and go and fight. However, if you start little by little, be friends with a person, start understanding what that person needs, possibly, it needs attention, possibly the person needs, occasionally a telephone call, or whatever the person needs, and you start going into it and start giving that to the person, you will build a bond with that person. And then you can keep it there, and then start isolating the person from friends and family and neighbors and all that, and start imposing what you want to do in that person, which is, could be labor or sex trafficking, and then exploit that person for a very long time. What I am trying to say is, with this grooming thing, it's so much more effective to have a trafficked person. It takes time, but it will last longer. Unfortunately, for traffickers, us human beings are objects and commodities. So so then they won't care. But the point is that this trying to caress the victim and trying to get them into it is very important. The other thing that is very important is the traffickers have developed this I don't know if I could call it intuition, experience, I guess, to see what that person needs. If it is a young, possibly a teenager, what that person needs, what is the problem, if this person needs attention, if this person needs whatever it needs. Nowadays, the problem is that, as Jamie was saying, so we send pictures and we send a lot of information. And that's one of the things that I want to make a comment on here. We said, do not give personal information. And most of the time, I guess people don't give personal information like passwords. I don't know who give a password, but we're not talking about that personal information. We're talking about any personal information. So if somebody comes and writes in, in Facebook or whatever, I had a big fight with my family today, the trafficker is going to be reading that and other people are going to be reading that. And today was a good day because I finally went to the park. You are giving information that people are going to use. I don't want to sound negative, but it's going to be used against you. So if you want to have, communication with your friends and, just, keep it short and easy, call the phone. I don't know what to say, but I just wanted to tell you that us as an adults also give information that could, could be eventually, work against us. So the grooming part is I wish that all of us recognize what is that grooming part. My experience doing the interviews at the whole community is that parents are so protective of their kids, and they do want to know everything that the kids are doing, like any other parent. It really doesn't matter. Like I was. I think that the thing with that is that, and Charlie probably can explain this in a better form because she was amazing when she explained this to me, is so we parents are trying to keep up and we go like Facebook and this, and I used to follow my kids on Vine to see what my kids were doing because I didn't want to give me the information and all these little tricks. And I thought that was up to date. And I don't think I was, because traffickers that's what they do all day long. That they have, like, they always will surpass me, or surpass parents. And so while we as a parents think that we have it under control, which is good because otherwise you get crazy, there is always something else that we can kind of renew the next, I don't know, month or whatever. And knowing that the traffickers are going to use that information to get the kids and, get them in their corner, that is very important because you have less chances to get a kid that has been groomed, that less chances to get back a kid that has been snatched. The kid is going to stay there. They are bonding. So the kid is going to get there and stay there and somehow justify their attitudes. And I am not blaming kids here. I'm talking about adults too. And I'm talking about labor trafficking too. And as one of the interviews that I did, I met this wonderful person in a lot of need of a job. And she actually let me talk to about this. Her account's heavily pregnant, and she found this amazing job online. I mean, it was so good. I even thought about, I might just kind of send the link to some of friends or something because it's really good. But analyzing and putting away the situation and having a cold mind, well, yeah, she needs a job, but everything that they are saying is really too good to be true. Like, why would she needs to travel another place to have this job? And they haven't really explained what is the job. Other things that I have, people have mentioned is that, they give you jobs with a job application. I mean, there are things, it's not that all the jobs are going to have a job applications, but then you start thinking about more things, like what is it more involved in here? Recognizing that grooming happens to adults, kids. If it happened to adults, of course it's going to happen to kids, LGBTQI community. Remember that, sometimes in our lives sometimes we are stable and we go, we have this go down. Sometimes we are not doing financially well. Sometimes we're not doing financially well. So all of us have this wave. And you know what? Traffickers are there. Traffickers will pay attention and see what they can do. So think about it, talk to your kids, because somebody else is going to talk to them before you. So that's what I have been trying to say.
Yes. And I really like the way you emphasize that the caregivers themselves could be trafficked, could be groomed, could be targeted. We've certainly seen cases here locally where a mother was she had a substance use disorder, and her trafficker said, it's not enough what you're doing. I want your daughter. So just to go back to what Charlie said earlier, but knowing that trafficking can take place of adults. So this guide is there to help, adults realize that they themselves might be targeted, and also to highlight that when they see all this happening with their own child, they might feel kind of thrilled. Oh, Sally has a new friend, or oh, that's great. Yeah, go. Yeah, another person to play basketball with my son. Oh, thank God I get some time off. That sounds really great. But there could be a grooming process happening here. So anyway, this is to alert folks to that. Charlie, Kaya, Jamie, any comments that you want to add to what Graciela shared about grooming, and also why it's in the guide here like this?
I wanted to say something really fast. I'm sorry. The other thing that I noticed is that, traffickers come and talk to parents and establish some kind of, it's not a stranger danger. It's somebody that they know. Traffickers come and say, hey, I can, bring you that thing that you needed from the store. And so then there is some kind of knowledge between parents and traffickers. And then when traffickers start targeting kids, then the kids go like, well, my mother talks to him, or my father actually goes and do that. So there is another wave of to look and to think about.
Yeah, great. Jamie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like the language of having like unmet needs and vulnerabilities, especially when we're talking about grooming. Um, I think there's plenty of adults who have a difficult time being able to meet unmet needs in their own life, but I think especially for children, they don't have a lot of like agency to be able to meet these unmet needs on their own. And so when we're talking about grooming, some of the best defense against grooming is talking to your kids about what unmet needs they have in their lives, whether it be attention, whether it be a lack of a sense of direction or purpose, or are they having some, mental health crisis that isn't really being addressed or is being under addressed? Um, and so when we have these conversations and we look to add these additional supports, it becomes more difficult for those traffickers to then identify these unmet needs and sink their claws into the kids. And we as parents and caregivers in a community, we're responsible for meeting these unmet needs for kids. So that's part of why grooming is paired alongside these unmet needs and vulnerabilities, is to really make that strong connection of no matter what social media platform it is, and to Graciella's point, like there's something new every week. What, like, it's difficult for adults to keep up, but what you can have a impact on is finding out what are these unmet needs in your kid's life and what are healthy, safe ways to get those needs met or realized. So.
And I
And
and I
Jamie,
I advanced the slide there because you have a nice segue going into talking about your kids, about what the unmet needs are, and you're going to talk about talking to kids.
and
Um,
Robin, I'm sorry, this is
yeah,
Charlie. Jamie, I apologize for I just wanted to piggyback off of something that Jamie said.
yeah,
I want to reemphasize the importance of having a conversation with your children. I had a mom who was old school and her parents were old school. And for many parents, they meet their children's basic needs. They make sure that their children are loved, that they have food to eat, that their medical needs, their educational needs are met. But it's so important to have that conversation because you may not know what's going on in school, right? You may not know what's happening in peer groups. And so it's so important to have those conversations, because I worked with a young lady who ended up being trafficked, not because of anything specifically that was happening at home. An unmet need at home is she felt very unpopular or unwelcomed in a school setting. And so someone was able to groom her just by offering that friendship, some type of connection to someone that she saw was popular, that she looked up to. So I just want to reemphasize, don't make that assumption that because you're meeting all of your child's needs, that they don't have any unmet needs. It really is important to have that conversation, as Jamie stated, and they might surprise you and they may open up when you welcome that discussion.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Charlie said. As you can see in this slide, we made a bullet point that says talk about unmet needs in the child or teen's life. Usually the teen or child isn't just going to come out and say, this is an unmet need I have. So like Charlie said, open up that conversation with them to have that.
exactly, exactly. And having a conversation is not an easy thing to do, right? So, so what we have here are some tips. And Jamie, do you want to walk through kind of our thinking on doing this slide? And I know you had a lot to do with helping to craft the this part of the guide as well.
Yeah, thinking back to interviews, which were so important. And I remember when we first started talking about this project, Robin, it was like, oh, we're going to create this guide for youth and caregivers. I was like, we have to talk to some kids. Like, we need to talk to them and see, how they feel about this topic. What do they already know? And who are they going to listen to about it? And, parents isn't huge on and high on that list of people they'll talk to. Not that parents and caregivers shouldn't talk to kids, but we also, developed materials for, youth to youth conversations and, a few other things. But, back to interviews, it really seemed like a theme in the interviews was that caregivers and youth, there seemed to be some discomfort about each group talking to the other group about this topic. And another thing that came from the interviews was parents and both youth are really misinformed on the topic. They really have a stereotypical kind of like Hollywood understanding of it. And so, you know, to talk to youth about human trafficking, start with what we did, ask them what they know. And really the first steps before you even have the conversation, learn about human trafficking, like educate yourself on trafficking so you know what you're talking about. And then find out what they already know about the topic and, provide them with definitions. And you can start doing this at a young age. You don't necessarily have to use the term human trafficking, with a like 7-year-old. But you can start, talking about healthy relationships and like consent. And if your uncle you don't care for wants to give you a hug and you say no, then that's cool. I'm going to back you on that. You don't have to hug your uncle. Um, and so there's just some basic groundwork to do where you start talking to your kids about human trafficking when you start talking to them about how they're not an object, how they're not like a commodity, when you start talking to them about consent. um, but creating a safe space is really important and having those conversations. And that might be, difficult to do. um, this is a difficult topic, and if they've had some encounter with trafficking, then there's probably been some intentional work done on the trafficker's behalf to create friction in a relationship between a child and the caregiver. Um, so, but these conversations aren't impossible, and creating a safe space is really about making it so there's no judgment, in that space. There's no like shock and awe. There's no, big reactions to what's happening to the kids, but really just like listening to them, asking them prompting questions. When you're talking to them about their unmet needs, it's not having judgment on what they consider unmet needs. Needs can be pretty objective when you're talking about like Maslow's like hierarchy of needs, but then how their experience can be really subjective. And so, yeah, you might be meeting all the, basic needs like food, security, shelter. But like as you go up that like hierarchy of needs, um, you do get to these really emotional needs, and you get to these who am I in the world needs, and all these social needs. So when you're talking to them about their needs, it's not assuming we know what their needs are. And it's not assuming that their needs are met, even though we are like, oh yeah, you have everything, what could be wrong? It's really about listening and hearing what they're saying, those unmet needs, because even if you think it's silly, that could be, that could be the place where um, that trafficker can, come target them.
Mhm.
And it's difficult. I don't think one parent or two sets of parents or uh, you know just a small, it really takes a village to meet all the needs in a youth's life. um and so really making sure that they have safe trusted adults, and safe trusted peers in their life who can help meet those needs as well. And then really just debunking this myth that trafficking is most likely going to happen because someone put a flyer under their windshield, or that someone followed them around IKEA, or whatever big kind of news stories or TikToks are being made about how trafficking happens. But really that the people that are more likely like to traffic them are going to be targeting them, and they're going to be someone who maybe was a stranger but they met online and then took some time to get to know them, um, or might be someone in their peripheral circle. And then in some cases, there is like familial trafficking, and it happens by someone you're really close with. um, so, and I think the other thing too is to let kids know that um, they have power in this situation. It's about empowering them to see the signs of trafficking, eh, for themselves, but for their friends. I think that's a really great strategy. Is like, hey, maybe this is not something I'm worried about for you at all, but maybe you could be the person who sees this stuff, in one of your friends, and maybe. And I think when kids are trusted with things, when you know it becomes about, you think about the developmental stage too of a teenager, they're becoming less and less, socially dependent on family and more on their peers. So you give them like an assignment, like, hey, watch out for your friends. I think, they will really appreciate that. And when we talk to the kids in the interviews, they just didn't think any of their friends would be able to recognize the signs. Or it's like, well, how about you become the friend who can recognize the signs then? um,
Yeah, yeah, really, really important. And also in terms of unmet needs, sometimes children take on that role of feeling responsible for helping the family meet its own needs, right? I mean, I'm thinking about a woman who was victimized by Jeffrey Epstein, who, they specifically targeted her when they knew that her father had died and she and her mother were struggling to pay the rent, right? Or her mother was struggling to pay the rent, I should say, but she wanted to take that on and help. So what you're talking about are parents being able to have conversations about something like making ends meet, but making sure that they're not putting that responsibility onto a child, or making sure the child doesn't see that as their burden. So yeah, thank you, Jamie. And thank you for raising the point also about the youth to youth conversations. We wanted to make sure that this was a conversation about trafficking within families and with caregivers and youth that could go in all ways: youth to caregiver, caregiver to youth, and youth to youth. So that we'll talk about the other tools later, but this idea about empowerment is empowerment of everybody with more knowledge, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very interesting to me. While I was doing the interviews, I didn't do focus groups. I did interview the youth by themselves, and I was very curious to know if they thought, if they could figure out if somebody was being trafficked, and most of them say yes, and asked why. And they gave me different information, like, well, probably they are getting isolated themselves, and they will have bruises and marks that, that I haven't seen it before. uh, one of them said, yeah, the way that they will be dressing, probably too provocative, and then later on not provocative and ashamed. There were different pieces of information where they were getting, this idea that they could have, seen that and possibly do something about it. After the interview, I have to mention that I did kind of say, yeah, like, it's also labor trafficking. It also happens to adults. It also happens to boys, if that was the general misunderstanding during the interview. But I think it's very, very important that peers to peers information spreads. And a few occasions they said, when we go someplace, we need to go with somebody, we need to go with a friend. And I thought that was absolutely true, even for adults. Always, tell people where you are. Go with somebody.
Exactly. Any other thoughts? I've moved the slide because, again, we're kind of moving and segueing nicely into the next topic. Again, kind of validating that people might feel awkward or uncomfortable talking about this with the youth, and that the youth might feel that way as well. And that just knowing that it's not like one and done. You can't go to a movie, you can't talk about something in the news one time. It's a ongoing conversation. Also because traffickers are going to have different angles. They're going to they could come back at any time. So anyway, Jamie, any other thoughts here?
Yeah, it just isn't a one-time conversation, and it probably doesn't only need to come from a parent or caregiver. It probably needs to come from a few different sources. I think the main topic on this slide is um, to make sure parents are talking to their kids both about sex trafficking, but also about labor trafficking. I don't think, well, um, the data shows, our data and then other data, that, labor trafficking isn't really considered the same way sex trafficking is. And it's a danger, especially for kids who are, looking for work for the first time. And, those job promises that look too
Oops,
good to
sorry.
be It's okay. This job promises that, look too good to be true. Like the story, I believe Graciela was sharing earlier. So yeah, it's something to keep having these conversations. Um, and I think when you get to the point with a child where it feels like more casual to have these conversations, then you're starting to get into a good place. But definitely the first time is probably going to be like awkward and uncomfortable, um, for both for both parties involved. Um, but as you continue to have these conversations, they do become a little, just from my own personal experience, talking to kids, the more often you have these conversations, the more kind of like casual, and now this is just something that we talk about. So,
Mhm, mhm. It's really
and
hard.
I'm sorry, I don't want to miss it. I wanted to touch on phone metadata.
Oh, yeah.
For a quick second, I said we talk about it later, but then I didn't see the opportunity um, in there, and I can provide a resource in the chat. So it's real easy to remove your phone metadata before posting photos. Um, and so that's like one of the tips that we want, caregivers to give to the youth in their lives is, download an app, remove that phone metadata, especially if you're posting pictures that were taken at home. Um, when you're out in public, like at a mall, and it's like obvious you're at a mall, that stuff is not as pertinent, but any photos that you're taking in your home, at a friend's house, in any like private environment, you really want to remove that phone metadata. So I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat that takes to a website, and it offers different apps and explains this a little bit more that you can download and add to your phone.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that we're never going to stop the technology. We're going to have to learn how to adapt to be knowledgeable about it, adapt to it, because the technology is neutral. And, we've certainly seen how traffickers are using it to, in trap and control victims. And so we need to be smart about it as well and counter it at every turn. Anything else about this particular slide that anybody wants to add?
I
Yeah.
I thought, go
Okay,
ahead,
Kathy, go
Gracia.
ahead. Yeah, I have been talking too much.
Well,
Okay.
one thing, no, you haven't, but one thing I do want to add is that it's okay if you're asked a question and you don't know the answer to it.
Ah.
And that's why I emphasized earlier that we don't expect parents or caregivers to be the expert on this topic. So when you are asked that question and you're like, oh, that's a good one, or I'm not really too sure about that, it's okay to be vulnerable and to be honest and share that with your child. And you know what, utilize your local resources such as that. Reach out or do a search on your own before you give that information. But I just wanted to emphasize, you're not, kids ask, I raised a little girl for 5 years. They ask you some of the wildest things that catch us off guard every single day. So just be prepared when you are having this conversation. You might get asked that question that kind of flies over your head like, oh, I wasn't, Stack didn't talk to us about this. And it's okay. And you know what, just be honest. Like I said, let that young person know, hey, you know what, that is an excellent question. I don't really have the perfect answer or the right answer for that. So let me look into it and let me get back. And then, like I said, utilize those local resources such as Survive and Thrive. And then have, be vulnerable and have those honest conversations with them.
Great. Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's so important. I mean, we're surprised all that, you can never kind of underestimate the despicability and the creativity of traffickers too, in reaching people and targeting vulnerabilities. And absolutely.
Wanted to say something about the interviews, Robin, really fast. Most of the parents told me that they were the ones who could teach their kids about human trafficking, which is super powerful and really, really good. However, also they told me that they would prefer somebody that had experienced that to come and talk to the kids. So I see this as a valuable, because I think that I completely support what Charlie's saying right now, and Jamie was saying, get informed and all that. bringing somebody that had experienced that, it would be really good as one of our, panel of experts here and all that. However, I want to, and I will go back and talk to my parents, not my parents, but my parents at the ones that I interviewed, and tell them and assure them that whatever resources you need, I think it will be really important, and that you are the person to talk to them. You don't have to have, suffer that to transmit the trauma or the experience. That it can be you. So I guess empowering the parents to say, hey, yeah, you got this. We help each other here.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to mention.
I wonder too, and this is a sidebar, we hadn't talked about this too much, but could we go on a little tangent, Jamie? And I'm thinking about you as a lived experience expert. When we see groups and organizations in the community wanting to have, a survivor speak about their experience of having been trafficked, how that can, it can be exploitative, it can be harmful, it can not be really the right path. So if we have any agencies or organizations, I know we have quite a few people on who are in social services organization. You want to say a couple words about a survivor's experience in speaking to groups and being that expert?
Yeah, I think what I've seen in the movement over the past almost decade is this like prevalence of viewing survivors as the most valuable for the stories that they could tell about how they were trafficked and how they got out, and wanting survivors to come and share their story with people. And often that's done with the intention of fundraising or educating, or maybe even kind of like scaring kids into like, this could happen, hear her story. But survivors really have like a whole, like, I mean, we are just as varied as any other group of people. There are so many different skills and things that they can bring to the table, and so many different ways that their experience can inform the anti-trafficking work. For example, consulting on campaigns like this,
Yes.
where you know for some survivors, if they feel like sharing their story feels empowering and they can find ways to do it in their terms that feels good for them, then that's great. I'm not saying that survivors should never share their stories, but I'm just saying there's so many different ways to have, like, for survivors to come alongside, to lead the work, to consult, to inform the work that go outside of sharing your story in a very public setting, and sharing a very specific part of an experience, as opposed to kind of the whole you know the whole person. So
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And understand that it is a complex ask, and you really do need to make sure that you are in sync. And there are a lot of groups in the community and in the nation that work directly with survivors, and survivors as they're are so important to inform the work. We're grateful that we have been able to have expertise inform this particular project. So across the board. Great.
I'll add
Yeah.
real quick, if you're going to have survivors come alongside, lead, consult, whatever it is, and then you need to pay them, and you need to pay them well. And this is not to you, Robin. This is
That's not a hint, right? No, yeah. No, you are there with us, and I'm grateful for that. And absolutely true. Thanks for adding that. Very important. And for those of you administrators like I am, build it into your grants when you write them. Just interpretation, if you don't have it for languages, being survivor informed with all your work, build it into your grant. That's one of your consultants that should be, compensated at the same rate as other experts in your effort as you're putting together advisory bodies or doing the work. So thank you for mentioning that. Kaya, you put in here, there's a question, and did I see it? I did. Oh, here it is. Somebody is asking, is there any plan to have the toolkit or other resources translated into Spanish? Yes, there is. We yesterday on our BB Cat Survivor Support Committee, Vanya has already got 2 interns working on it. And Kaya, I need to talk to you all about how we could possibly do that. So yes, we are trying to figure out which materials will be translated definitely into Spanish, possibly other languages. We have rat cards, which I'm going to show you in a sec. So as time is going on, let me go ahead and move to the next slides and kind of wrap and first of all, tell you the answer is yes. And we're working on that right now. So thank you. Here's the QR code that Kaya mentioned earlier. I don't know if you want to try to scan it now. We have put this toolkit up there as well as our other I hope it works. It worked for me yesterday. We put our other tools up there, and know that you are seeing this during a soft launch, right? So we're at a stage in this development where you're getting almost a sneak preview. This is like going to the restaurant before they start advertising. You're seeing stuff before we've even put some identifiers on what the tools are, but you can explore them. They're pretty self-explanatory. You can see some are geared to youth when you're talking about you as a youth. As well as you as a caregiver. We have a couple things. Let me just move to that now. So there's our QR code. So here are some of the other items we have. So online safety and privacy, we've talked about that. We can't talk about it enough. We've got guidance on that. We are going to have a couple of different rat cards, and you can see the imaging that also, again, I can't say enough about being a nonprofit. Again, if you're developing your budget, if you're working with others, make sure you have a strong communications budget, because that is what we have to do in this. It's not, there's so many myths and misconceptions around trafficking. I'm encountering it every single time, and there's so much we need to do. So definitely build in communications expertise with local entities in your area, like your, SMPR is for us here. Know that there's lots of information that are on our toolkits. And I want to just go back to Kaya. Kaya, do you want to say something about these tools in particular? Anything you wanted to add?
I would like to mention that in the toolkit item to the right, farther to the right, this is our Stay Safe and Stay Aware in Leon County and online. We kind of designed it in mind of a phone message room. So you see back and forth, the conversation and the question, they're going back and forth. So kids can relate to a chat room, like something online.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, very creative, very, very impactful. And you can see a lot of the information from the toolkit is sort of distilled and put in here in little snippets. So that's the whole idea behind this, is to have tools that can be easily downloaded and shared, information that can be printed out and handed out at events. Sometimes people still do actually like to take things in their hands and hold them. So we're going to have that as part of our written products of this grant. It's going to be free and available for others to use as well. So anyway, so that is the kind of sneak preview, but the release of the toolkit, but really this about giving you, as people in the community who are caregivers, maybe who are youth, maybe who are people who are around caregivers and youth, giving you another tool for you to start the conversation so that those groups can have conversations to stay protected and to be safe. We've got a few minutes left. We've got 8 minutes left, maybe, to talk and answer any of your questions if you want to put them in here. I'd like to ask too, all of you to say, we have preliminary thoughts. We're going to clearly share this with the school boards, the PTAs, all of our social services agencies in our communities. Who do you think else? And I'll ask this to everybody who's attending as well. Do you see this being useful in your community? Who would you like to share it with? And just our groups, if you want to just start to talk, and everybody, you can chat in. how do you think this could be used? Let's just kind of do a little brainstorming about how we can get this out to the world.
Well, I'd like to start off and say that since we soft launched it, I shared it with my own family as well. I have a little brother, he's around 11, and he plays online gaming a lot. So you can share with your friends, family. We underestimate the power of our own individual selves and being able to spread the awareness. So
Thank you. That is so important. How many times that people, even in our family, sometimes, I think in my family, they don't really even know what I do sometimes. So how can you talk to the people that are closest to you and let them know what you care about, what you're doing, and yeah, here's something that can be useful. I bet your family was very proud of you for your work here too. So I'm sure they were, and they as well they should be.
I think that's, you know, for anyone who's having difficulty having these conversations, as the guide's kind of intended to be, you know, it can, you know, be that thing that starts the conversation, you know, whether it is a caregiver to youth, but even just um, as like we're wanting youth to be able to like look out for this in their friend groups, like we as parents and caregivers ourselves can share it with our networks, and you know it can start some conversations. um so just obviously like word of mouth, there's lots of other ways to spread it, but I think word of mouth is so powerful. um and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and we have two people. I got Chris and someone also, Chris Cornick. Thank you. Hi, Chris. To don't forget guardians ad litem in your community. Everybody, to even take it. And we don't have the budget to kind of physically reproduce things, but everything's done online these days. So you as a GAL or an organization or a court-based family courts, the justice system can be very, very wonderful to share this. And then someone else said how beneficial it could be in the foster resource parent pre-service training. Yes. So absolutely. And I'm also thinking about some places talk about housing of youth or other sort of any place that does any residential, non-residential services program for youth, right? Charlie, you're nodding.
That was actually going to be my recommendation, is that residential youth services. That's my heart. That's where
Mhm.
I started. And so many of us, we are in front of youth all day, every day, and they are youth in care, and already just being in care and aging out of care, that already puts them at risk for so many other different things. And so I definitely think that this would be an excellent tool for those of us, who are with them every day. And then we're able to do, because they're in that residential setting, you're able to do it on a more informal basis, where you can actually encourage a dialogue between yourself and that young person. Because just like Jamie said, it's important to have those safe spaces. So yes, it's great to have that in schools, but when they're in that home setting, it's so much more informal. And I've had some awesome conversations with my kiddos that I worked with who are in care.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? We're just about at the end of our session today. It's been great. Anybody want to say anything, closing remarks?
I know we kind of talked about this briefly in regards to social media, but I just want to emphasize the importance to our parents. Something that Graciela and I encountered is a mom who stated, I know where my child is all the time. And they could probably tell you where that child is every second of the day. However, what we notice is, does that child have a phone? Does that child have a tablet? Do they have a computer? Because if that child is upstairs in their room and they're on their phone, they're on social media, that is how many traffickers gain access to our young people. So taking the time to learn what some of those tips are to keep young people safe online. I know Graciela talked about that too, but just really, I know because we didn't really go into specific step-by-step details, but there's so many resources out there and suggestions, but definitely look into that. Because back in the day, we hung out at the mall and at the park, but traffickers know that children and our young people are online. And so that's where they're finding them. So just, do some research into looking into ways to keep young people safe when they're logged on. And thank you
Thank
so much.
you. We really can't emphasize online. Thank you very much, Charlie. And I want to thank all of you. Thank you. This was a very good conversation, don't you think? I think it turned out fine.
I think
Um,
so.
I want to thank all of you for your work. You know, Charlie, you worked with us on doing training of the partners who were doing interviewing and have informed us, and you were with Graciela at Hope. And I really can't thank Salter, Mitchell, and Kaya for all your brilliance and your hard work on this. It was just been great. And Jamie, your editing, thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, you have just been front and center with learning more from the research you've done. And also, everybody, you should know Jamie is a consultant with Stack. We're working on several other projects, very exciting. Stay tuned on those.